what has your experience been with the college rep questions? And then in answer to something like, tell me about yourself, what makes an answer boring and what makes it interesting?
Yeah, very important that when you start that question, you just don't just, pour out everything, so that after about, 30, 40 seconds, the panel loses interest in listening to you. The presentation is the ice-breaking activity. So in that scenario, if you start burning bridges and attacking left, right, and center, saying this concept is wrong, day surgery concept is wrong, and enhanced care pathways are wrong, it gives the impression that you're gonna be sort of like the backseat driver doing a lot of talking, as opposed to front driver taking the wheel and moving the vehicle forward. In a job interview, that is what, as the CD, I would be looking. Is this candidate good to be the front seat driver, hand over the steering wheel, and then take the vehicle moving forward?
Hello, I'm Dr. Pranav Kukreja. I am a consultant anaesthetist and clinical director at the Lister Hospital in Stevenage. And I have with me today my guest, Dr. Cham Varnapura, who is also a consultant anaesthetist, and he is the clinical director of the anaesthetic department at the Luton and Dunstable Hospital. Both these hospitals are of a similar size in terms of their anesthetic department and what we deliver in terms of the activity. So we thought it'll be a good idea to just have a discussion around the interview process for new candidates or new consultants that we appoint, which both of us, I know we've done quite a bit of that recently. And hopefully from our discussion, people who are appearing for these interviews and prepping for those interviews, they'll find some value and usefulness in this. So Cham, thank you very much. Welcome.
Very happy
Good to
to
see
be
you
here.
again.
Likewise.
So let's jump straight in. And I think let's talk about, first of all, the structure of the NHS consultant interview. So talk us through what the structure of the NHS consultant interview is at your place. And yeah, let's just begin with the structure.
Yeah, Pranav, thanks for the opportunity. So consultant anaesthetist interview, it's a very well organized and well thought process. Essentially, the interview starts with what is known as the psychometric assessment process. That happens before the interview proper, where a team of psychometric specialists comes in and assess a candidate running a multidisciplinary meeting scenario, and they take notes and they produce feedback to us, to the interview panel, on the day of the interview. So that feedback essentially says us what are the strong points or how well the candidate ran the psychometric analysis testing, and what were the weak points, what were the points that were not so strong of. And they guide us to focus our questions. Now then, if you come to the interview panel normally consists of roughly about 6 to 8 interviewers. So there would be one from the anesthetic college as the college rep. There would be the general manager of the department. There would be the clinical director of the department. There would be somebody representing the executives of the department. And there would be someone from we call them as the associate specialty. For example, if it's the anesthetic, it would be a surgeon most of the time. If it's an intensive care, it would be a respiratory physician or someone else who has intensive care.
Mm-hmm.
And then there would be somebody from the culture and social aspect of the department. So all in all, and if it's a busy university hospital, there would be somebody representing the university side of it. So it
the
is
academic side of it.
Academic side of it, yes. So it's a very well planned process. Then
So we'll come to the psychometric part in a second, but let's say you've met up with the panel and these maybe in a boardroom or wherever the candidates are meant to come. When you first get together, what's the discussion that takes place typically in your hospital between the members of the panel?
Yeah, so assuming that the psychometric feedback is to come, before the formal psychometric feedback is to come, normally we introduce each other, and then we start talking about whether have we actually met the candidates, if any of the
Hmm.
candidates has approached us, and had we had a pre-interview meeting, and are there any internal candidates, and if particularly if the external candidate is important, that we say that we met the candidates has made the effort of coming and speaking to us. Then we sort of like plan in our place. The questions are planned as what is known as value added or value based questions. So each of the questions we anticipate or we expect the answers to be associated with trust values.
Okay.
Important for candidates to go through the trust values of the trust that you are applying. And if I think I would strongly advise memorizing the trust value and try to talk about the trust value, because our questions, even though they start as generic questions, slowly we try to bring it into a trust values. Then we each decides what sort of questions that we wanted to ask. For example, Royal College Rep normally ask about teaching, training, whether they are on the specialist registry, how did they enter into the specialist registry, any audits, any research, that sort of activity. The complementary specialist consultant would be asking a scenario. So we decide which one of us would be asking a clinical scenario, which one would be is asking about team building, conflict resolution, working as a team, and which one would be asking about managing in a difficult situation. So it's like that.
So in all of this, is there ever a point where you say that this question is too difficult or this question is too tricky? And if there is a tricky question, would you limit that to maybe one question being a tricky question? Because I'm guessing the objective is not to catch the candidates out, it's
Yes.
to help them bring out the best in themselves, isn't it? So has that happened, or is there like a tricky situation? Usually it's the mistake question, isn't it? Where have
Yes.
you made a mistake in your career? So just talking of tricky questions, I know we said we'll talk about it later, but the mistake question, have you ever made a mistake in your life, in your career, in your professional career, and what did you learn from it? What do I often wonder about what's the best thing to say in this. I mean, let's say someone had a never event where they blocked the wrong side, for example,
Yeah.
right? Now that we know within anesthesia is something that can happen and has probably happened to a lot of people. And it would be a perfectly good example. But I suspect some candidates would be quite wary of saying that out loud, mainly because there's non-anesthetists there and it might just seem like a terrible mistake to them. I'm always torn in that dilemma of, is that too much to say? I mean, what's your feeling? What would, if someone said that, okay, I blocked the femoral on the wrong side. What would your personal impression be? And what do you think your panel members typically at your hospital would think of a mistake like that? Of an answer like that, I mean.
Yeah, so it's always a difficult situation when it comes to the tell me about your mistakes. But in over the last couple of years when I was in the interview panels, when this question often comes, particularly from
Hmm.
the exec side or from a
Yes.
management side. So when it is being asked, there are several types of candidates. Some gives you a sort of like a dystopian answer, like, it's what you wanted to hear. Nothing has ever happened from me. It's absolutely perfect. However, I came across one of my friends having this situation. I mean, my understanding is that we, as anesthetists, we are doing a risky job. We take challenges day in and day out. 999 of us must have had made a mistake, and that's the that's the nature of our job. This question is actually an opportunity for the candidate to show their integrity, A, to own the problem, and B, to have the courage to talk about it in public and reflect the answer to such a way to say that, yes, this has happened from me. On a day that it was a busy theatre list and there was a lot of distraction, I was trying to get on with my list. Accidentally, I blocked the wrong site. You can say I've taken this shortcut, or I've actually went through stop before you block or stop prep and block. But this has actually happened, and I was absolutely devastated after. what happened actually and what actually felt. So you own the problem and you
Mm.
carry on saying, I feel really bad, I feel awful because this has not happened to me. I've heard about it happening to my colleagues, but never from me. I couldn't believe how this has happened to me. However, I have taken my professionalism in that moment and I started doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And how did you manage the situation, including the duty of candor, including how best that you manage the given scenario.
I think that is very, very well put about I've never put it quite like that. That it's a question of, it's almost telling us about your integrity, that you're
Yes,
owning the problem.
yes,
And a common thing I find is a superficial answer. Okay, once you've made the mistake, mistakes happen to everyone. How did you deal with it? I think at the most people would probably go up to the point of duty of candor, and that's like a must, isn't it? You
yeah,
can't not talk about duty of
yeah,
candor. But I think what would give them more credibility is if they went on to then say, so I did a datex, for example, is not, in my opinion, not good enough. You did a datex, but then what happened after that? What was the action that took place, or you helped organize so this doesn't happen again, not just in your life, but also in your colleagues' life, and how you dealt with that particular error as a systemic problem and helped others. So I think that's, I would like to hear that. And I think that gives them the extra credibility, doesn't it?
yes. It's actually you should take it as an opportunity to talk, because we get a summary of your CV, so we know your training is like, your qualification is like, the audits you've done, the research you've done, but we don't get to read things like this unless and otherwise you actually talk about it, saying that this has happened to me and I felt really bad because this is not what was expected of me. This is not what I was trained for. Despite that, this has happened to me. So what I have done thereafter is what we wanted to hear. And that's actually showing how you took a problem as a professional, as an adult, and in future, that what measures you've taken to this to never happen again. Or if this happened to a colleague of yours or a resident of yours, you know exactly then how they would be feeling, what they will be going through, and how would you be coming forward to help them. So that is what this is situation
This
is all.
question is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is an absolute must for most people to have prepared. Because if you turn up to an interview and you haven't got a credible answer for this, I think that would come across quite poorly, wouldn't it? Like you were saying initially, if you said, I haven't really come across anything in my career, but my colleague. I mean, what would you think if they said, I haven't, but I saw my colleague, or the resident I was working with did X, Y, Z. But because the buck stops with me, because I was a locum consultant at the time. The buck stops with me, and I felt responsible for it, etc., etc. I don't know. What would you think of that?
Yeah. So you have to own the problem. I mean, if, for example, I can give you this question is time tested question. It's always comes in
Yeah.
an interview panel, and the execs really love to ask this question. I can tell you what, in my interview this question was asked, and I said I've anesthetized a patient without a valid consent, and I felt absolutely terrible about it.
Mm.
Everyone checked, but we all checked a consent that was done a week ago for the same procedure. And everybody thought
Yeah.
this is the right question. And then I said, because this patient has passed through so many holes in the system, because there would be a HCA picking them up, then there would be the ODP checking, then there would be a nurse checking, then there would be me checking. So all of us actually overlook this particular question. So I raised my hand and I said, I will take the responsibility. Then the question came, are we going to go ahead with the procedure, or are we going to wake this patient up? Because now we have anesthetized a patient with not a valid consent. Then consensus was, we all decided, patient came to the hospital, patient sat in front of us, patient started giving us a history, allowed us to examination. So it gives us the implied consent, even
Yeah.
though it's not signed and written, and it would be actually not fair by the patient to wake them up, because this is a procedure that they must need to have a good
Yeah.
quality of life. So we decided to carry on. So something like that. I own the problem.
Yeah.
And once the patient is woken up, the process starts, went and apologizing and talking about it. In fact, the patient thanked us, saying, "Oh my God, thank you so much for doing this. If
Could
it,
you
yeah, we had to go through the whole process." So yeah, this
Yeah, no, so that I think this question is a definite. So we'll go through other similar types of questions, but and we'll come back to the psychometric as well, but let's talk about the pre-interview meetings that candidates are expected to have with the panel members, because obviously they get told in advance of the interview that you can have such and such people, and candidates are expected, I think, having spoken to some of the execs, they remember if you haven't reached out to them, because they're quite surprised. They come across a candidate and they're like, I'm not sure so and so got in touch with me. Now, are they just a done thing because it's common courtesy to do this? Or do you think you've come across situations where candidates have actually gained something out of meeting the execs before?
I think it's both. It's part of common courtesy, but I think more is that we would like to know about you. If I'm thinking of coming and joining your department, Pranav, I want to show you that I have the interest, I have the initiativeness. I would like to come and see how the department is, to start where the coffee room is, where do I come and park the car? I would like to show that interest. So in that aspect, this is important. I would advise strongly to all candidates, once you get the shortlisting and once you said that these are the people who will be on your interview panel, reach out to them individually, write to them formally saying, I'm so and so, I've been shortlisted. I would very much like to come and meet you and talk to you. What you wanted is to say that I wanted I wanted to have a discussion. I wanted to have a chat with you to say how well I will be suiting into your department, into your hospital. That's why I wanted to come and have this discussion with you. You could be an internal candidate or you could be an external candidate. It doesn't matter.
So what if you're an internal candidate then? What do you do then? Because you already kind of know the people and you know the layout of the hospital, where you might not have met some of the other people who can be on your panel. But do you think there's anything they can gain out of talking to the non-execs or the execs, or let's say the general manager for theatres or the division or something like that? Do you think they might get an idea of the types of questions? I mean, some people do that, isn't it? They will sometimes tell you that this is my particular area of interest and I'm going to ask you about this. So that's another question you've bagged.
Yeah, yeah. Some people might say that, for example, we are in the process of getting vascular services into our hospital. So I know my general manager would be saying something, I'm interested in knowing why this change, why that we need to take over vascular, what's our challenges, how have we gunned ourselves to face the challenges, something like that. They would give you a little bit of a taste of what they would like to talk about or what they would like to. They would not going to be saying the question per se, but
Yeah.
they would be saying that I'm interested in knowing this. They would be saying that you know what, you get plenty of clues by meeting them, because from my experience, we have had a candidate who came in. They were moving from locum post to a locum post to a locum post for about 5, 6 locum posts, and then applied for a substantive job in our hospital. So my GM said that, you could talk about why you finally decided to choose our hospital over 5, 6, 7, 8 hospitals, or since becoming CCT in anesthetics. That would give you a good opportunity to say that why we are the final destination and how well you will be suited in our hospital. So that was a really nice way of
Yeah.
knowing them, really nice way of knowing why we are the final why do you think we are the final destination? Why do you think that
Yeah.
what's preventing you from moving from us to another hospital? That sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So I would strongly
Yeah.
advocate.
It's a definite. Well, it has to be done, but I think there's more to it than just being courteous, because you do
Yes.
get quite a fair bit out of meeting those people. Moving on to the presentation. So sometimes candidates are asked to give a presentation before the interview, and I felt that the main purpose of that presentation is usually to just get them, it's a bit like a warm up. you're given a topic which you already know about. You come prepared. You're told about how many minutes you've got or how many slides you can have, and then it's a bit of a warm up and for everyone to know each other. The presentation topic in your hospital, do you normally decide that or someone else decides that?
Normally, in my department, I decide the presentation topic, and so it will pass through the general manager. For example, if it's involved financial aspects or staff planning or things like that, normally it comes from the CD in our hospital.
When you're thinking about the presentation topic, what's your general line of thinking about
So
what they should talk about?
yes, so if the hospital has had a recent CQC visit, that's definitely going to be your presentation topic. I can guarantee on that. So go through thoroughly. Now, for example, we have had several recent CQC visits, and we have had an obstetric job advertised. So our topic was that, what were our shortcomings of the recent CQC report, and how do you think that we should be? What strategies do you think we should be taking to improve on it? And for the vascular, we were talking about what challenges do you think that we would be anticipating in relocating an arterial vascular service, existing arterial vascular service into our system. So things like that, something
Yeah,
common, something current. For example,
to make them think.
yes, to make them think. Now, if we had a pre-assessment job done, and our topic was like, how best do you think artificial intelligence would going to be replacing the role of a pre-assessment anesthetist or pre-assessment nurse?
Yeah.
Things like that.
So in a question like that, right? And I like presenting maybe a contrarian view to say that, well, okay, GERFT says we should be doing X, Y, Z, but you haven't got the money to do that. So do you think GERFT is right in it, or how wrong or right you are? But again, yes, we're saying we want to see the candidates thinking, but do we like the kind of people, okay, do you like the kind of people who how not conforming to normal things would you like them to be, and what's acceptable? So there's a way of saying everything politically, saying ABC is correct but XYZ is wrong. Or how extreme can you be in your thinking, in criticizing something, or actually presenting? If you genuinely feel that, let's say a GUFT concept I don't agree with because it's got these many flaws, do you think that will go down well with the execs or the managers in there? Would everybody have that kind of acceptance of maybe a radical thought or an idea? I mean, just an interesting thing I sometimes wonder about.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're there to convince the panel to say, I've gone through the training, I've passed the exams, my portfolio is job well done. So please think of giving me the job. In a nutshell, that
Hmm.
it is. So in that scenario, and the presentation is the ice-breaking activity. So in that scenario, if you start burning bridges and attacking left, right, and center, saying this concept is wrong, day surgery concept is wrong, and enhanced care pathways are wrong, you're gonna be, it gives the impression that you're gonna be sort of like the backseat driver doing a lot of talking, as opposed to front driver taking the wheel and moving the vehicle forward. In a job interview, that is what, as the CD, I would be looking. Is this candidate good to be the front seat driver, hand over the steering wheel, and then take the vehicle moving forward? So think of that actually. Don't get into too many dilemma. You're welcome to express varied opinions, differences of opinion, how you see that various activities, various opinions affecting the functioning of NHS, functioning of the role, but don't go into fine nitty-gritties and dilemmas, because that is not meant during this interview.
Yeah, and also if you do want to touch on something like that, my point is don't just criticize.
Yeah.
If you don't like something, yes, you can critique it and say, this is what I find problematic with it, but also offer a solution, also offer what you would do instead. Because as you said, the last person you want in your department is someone who goes right to the back and just criticizes
Yeah.
and does nothing about thing. So you want people to be actually proactive. And yes, they might get it wrong sometimes, and that's fine, but it's new ways of thinking. And these things actually do matter, don't they?
Absolutely, yes. They do matter a lot because um, we when we are appointing a new consultant, what we are looking for is somebody we could hand over the baton and move on. So that is very important. We don't want that sort of a personality who's very pessimistic, everything, the half glass, half empty glass kind of a scenario. We don't want half empty glass sometimes is the reality, but we want it to be put it in such a way. Yes, it's half empty. Yeah, but then there is a little half that is filled bottom. I think we should start from that and see whether we could survive on that, slowly try to fill it up to make it a full glass. That sort of an attitude I'm looking when I'm trying to appoint somebody to my department.
Yeah. And that probably brings us nicely on to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is like the opening question of most interviews is by the college rep, who is essentially there to quality check you, and they're representative of the Royal College of Anaesthetists, usually another consultant anaesthetist in another hospital, not your employing hospital. And their question usually has to do with either tell me about yourself or tell me why you are suitable for this job and why your teaching and training makes you suitable for this. That's what my experience has been. So what has your experience been with the college rep questions? And then in answer to something like tell me about yourself, what makes an answer boring and what makes it interesting, or what kind of clicks with the panel?
Yeah, very important that when you start that question, you just don't just, pour out everything, so that after about, 30, 40 seconds, the panel loses interest in listening to you. I normally, when I advice on to my internal candidates when they come and do internal interview practice, or to senior residents, ST7s, when they come and do interview practice with me, what I say is that you structure it in such a way, make a small heading, and then talk about it. I can give you an example. If the college rep sometimes asking, why you, why here, why now? Tell me why the panel should be giving this job. What are your strong points? Take me through your training and then explain to me how well you best suited for this job, something to that matter. So you could say in my teaching and training. So that's one subheading, and talk about either from your recent most post, that is either a clinical fellow or senior resident, into stage 2 resident, stage 1 resident, and then the exams that you have very quickly. So that's one tick. In my teaching and training, I've done this. I am now an ST7 in Lister Hospital doing my vascular SIA. Before then, I've completed my advanced airway and bariatric at Luton and Dunstable Hospital. I was a stage 2 trainee at Bedford Hospital, and there I managed to clear my final FRCA in its first setting. And before then, I was a stage 1 trainee. So go like that. So quickly. The next thing is so that's your training element. Next thing is and during this process, I have what are your QIPs, quality improvement projects, and clinical governance work that you put. And then underneath that, your research and audit, and underneath that, what's teaching activities, simulation and teaching activities that you have done. And under that, you can talk about what sort of other leadership activities you have done, whether you've been representative of the foundation trainees or something like that.
But isn't there an argument to say that you would already, and I'm just just for discussion's
Yes.
sake, isn't there an argument to say that you would have already seen my CV
Yes.
and the panel would have had some idea of my CV? So should I not just focus on, let's say, the most interesting parts of my training and just talk about that?
Yes, you're absolutely right, because panel do have access to your full CV. But when you start saying that, if when I go as the college rep, when I wanted actually to highlight something on the candidate, I would say yes, or I would stop them and I would say, thank you so much. I've seen your CV. Tell me what is outstanding of all your training that we think we should be giving you this job for. Because you don't know what your college rep will be going to be gearing, always start with best to start with that basic model. And if you think that your college rep sort of like wanted to divert you, they will divert you. Tell me what is most outstanding. What are you most proud of your training over the last 7 years, over the last 9 years? That gives you an opportunity to talk about highlights of your CV, like being a principal investigator for an audit, or winning some prize, or winning a prize at the exam, or doing a quality improvement project that would actually made a difference. So things like that you can talk about then.
So follow-up questions to that. I recently had in last, the last lot of interviews we had, the college rep was someone who was also a vascular anesthetist elsewhere, and they like to ask questions. They ended up asking the candidates, how do you assess the suitability? No, he asked them, how do you assess the competence of a surgeon you're working with? And I think questions like that are good because it almost throws them off
Curveball.
the prepared line of thinking
Yeah.
and just makes you think on your feet. So I guess in those terms, it's a question of nerves and how much of your interview, what you're saying, is just preparation. I think they won't. It's a good question like that to bring out the real person, and hence I think it's important to practice before not be too nervous because you want your real personality to show.
Yeah.
And not hide because you've been asked what you might perceive as a tricky question and not be able to articulate it well then, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a nice question because it actually tries to find out, as a professional adult, how would you work with your surgical colleague, surgical counterpart? What would you think that you would want it to work with a particular surgeon, and you would look forward on a Monday morning coming in and anesthetizing for this surgeon? That's what you need to then talk about. But I know that we can discuss about the patient, we can have a consensus opinion, and they respect me. So things like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a tricky question to ask. Great. So I think we'll call it a day for today. And what I'm going to try and do is we'll go through a few other questions, specific questions that might get asked or come across, or I'm sure you've come across a lot of questions. We'll chat about that in the next episode. So nice to see you again.
Likewise, thank you so much for the opportunity, Pranav.